All right, welcome detectives. Grab a seat. I'm your lead investigator, and today we are opening the docket on one of the most manipulative, meticulously staged murders in recent history. We're talking about the 2016 case of 22-year-old Katie Blauvelt. As an explainer of the raw case files, my goal today is to walk you through the evidence exactly as we encountered it on the ground. We are going to examine how a former Army sergeant used his military background to orchestrate what he thought was a near-perfect crime, and how piece by piece we completely dismantled his master plan. Okay, let's dive straight into today's briefing. We're going to break this down into 6 crucial phases: the victim's final hours, the critical 5-hour gap, the crime scene staging, the conflicting witness statements, a high-stakes funeral sting operation, and finally, the 6-year manhunt. Let's start right at the beginning with Phase 1, the victim's final hours on October 24th, 2016. We absolutely have to start with the victim's timeline, tracing her exact movements leading right up to her sudden disappearance. Because what's wild here is just how incredibly fast Katie went completely off the grid after a totally normal afternoon shift at PetSmart. So look at the data we pulled. At 2:15 p.m., she's captured on workplace CCTV, totally fine. At 3 p.m., she clocks out, calls her mom, snaps a quick selfie. She's got plans for dinner at 7 p.m. But right after that 3 p.m. mark, her phone pings a tower for the final time before losing signal completely. When she doesn't show up for dinner, her family obviously panics, and she's officially reported missing at 7:48 p.m. The sheer speed of her vanishing act is just staggering. Which brings us to Phase 2, the critical 5-hour gap. Guys, this right here is the biggest black hole of our entire investigation. We have a massive 5-hour gap where Katie basically vanished into thin air. Untangling what happened in those exact 300 minutes took us years to piece together. I mean, what exactly went down between 3 p.m. and 7:48 p.m.? Sometime during this window, her car was inexplicably abandoned in a parking lot just a few miles away from where she'd eventually be found, and it was left there as if she had bailed out in a huge hurry. Finding out who intercepted her during this 5-hour void was the ultimate key to breaking this case wide open.
Moving on to Phase 3, the crime scene staging.
Fast forward to 12:33 a.m., roughly 10 hours after Katie was last seen. The silence breaks when a man named Wayne Ruhr calls 911. Now notice how meticulously the killer arranged the elements at this location. We roll up to an abandoned house near Discover Church, way deep in the woods. Inside, we find apparent satanic graffiti spray painted on the walls. Katie's body is hidden away inside a large concrete box in the basement, literally sealed shut with plywood. And the 911 caller, Wayne, he was a friend of Katie's, and he leads our responding officers straight to her. When they remove that plywood, it's a brutal scene. Katie has 16 stab wounds, a knife is still lodged in her neck, but strangely, there are 0 signs of a struggle. It became clear that the killer arranged the graffiti and the hidden box specifically to frame Wayne, who had just walked right into the location and made himself our prime suspect. It was brilliant, honestly. The perpetrator used his military background to construct a near-perfect diversion. He was banking on us arresting Wayne right out of the gate. See, Wayne had previously dated Katie and even lived with her and her husband, John Blauvelt. When detectives brought Wayne into the interrogation room, they almost pushed an innocent man into a false confession. They were entirely unaware they were playing right into the real killer's master plan.
Let's look at Phase 4, conflicting witness statements.
So when we actually started asking the right questions, let's see how the real suspect, Katie's husband John Blauvelt, tried to control the narrative. The contrast here is just night and day. John strategically planted lies with his inner circle to secure an alibi. He casually told detectives that Katie was, quote, dating around, a little seed of doubt he'd also planted with his roommate, Crystal. So when we interview Crystal, she unknowingly acts as John's shield, feeding us his fake alibi that he was home from 5 p.m. onward. But then, Katie's niece, Cheyenne, steps up and blows the case completely wide open. She gives us the investigative reality. John was incredibly violent. In fact, Katie had filed a restraining order after he literally pulled a gun on her. And the kicker? John stood to pocket a $150,000 military life insurance payout.
Now, when you take their witness statements and cross-reference them with the digital forensics, wow, the whole house of cards just completely collapses. John's carefully constructed alibi of being home at 5 p.m., instantly destroyed by his own cell phone records, which pinged near the crime scene at 6:15 p.m. And get this, a totally new potential accomplice. His army buddy, Charles Scott, suddenly pops onto our radar because Charles's phone pinged in the exact same area. Then we have Hannah, John's 17-year-old girlfriend, who lied about taking out the trash on the night of the murder. But John slipped up in his own interview and admitted they actually threw away several, quote, towels that night.
Okay, phase 5, the funeral sting operation. So we are frustrated by John's evasiveness, and we desperately need his DNA to match the samples found under Katie's fingernails. But we don't have a judge's warrant for his DNA yet, so we had to get a little creative and set a trap. It's a textbook undercover extraction. Our detectives get to the funeral home early, wire the entire room with hidden cameras and microphones, and strategically place cups of water all around. All we had to do was wait for John to take a drink, leave his discarded cup behind, and boom, we have legally obtained abandoned DNA. Simple, right? But this sting caught way more than just genetic material. While he was secretly being recorded standing right next to the casket alongside his giggling 17-year-old girlfriend Hannah, John was caught actually snapping photos of Katie's body with his cell phone. And then he uttered this deeply chilling phrase, "They didn't wipe her down." I mean, just think about that. It is a completely disturbing, horrifying insight into the mind of a killer who is literally reviewing his own handiwork at the funeral. Which brings us to our final phase, phase 6, the 6-year manhunt. Realizing the net was closing and the pressure was on, John abandoned his military post, grabbed Hannah, and they vanished. 3,000. That is the total number of miles the pair fled. We were literally tracking a ghost. They drove 1,600 miles to Las Cruces, New Mexico, where they got briefly spotted on a CCTV camera. Just a couple of days later, they abandoned their crashed red Yukon another 1,400 miles away, way out deep in the Oregon mountains, leaving behind a laptop and their camping gear. Now, Hannah couldn't handle life on the run forever. When she was finally intercepted after returning to South Carolina, she completely cracked under the pressure of the interrogation room. She officially confirmed John's brutal, premeditated confession, handing us details that only the true killer would know. She told us John found it, quote, really funny that the knife actually broke during the attack. And even worse, she shared Katie's heartbreaking final words with us. Despite going totally off the grid, erasing his identity, and starting a whole new life under the alias Ben Clean, justice is extremely patient. Look at this timeline. From the initial DNA match in his flight in late 2016 to the Washington State sightings in 2017, and then Hannah finally handing over his highly incriminating journal in 2018. It took a really long time, but in 2022, the U.S. Marshals finally brought him down in Oregon. And in September 2024, John Blauvelt was finally permanently sentenced to life without parole. But you know, as we close this case file today, there is still one loose thread that keeps me up at night. While John is rotting behind bars and Hannah served her time as an accessory, Katie's damaged cell phone left us with one chilling, completely unresolved mystery. We know for a fact John was waiting in the basement. But did his army buddy Charles, or maybe someone else entirely, help lure Katie to that location during that critical 5-hour gap? The digital footprint just stops dead there, leaving us to wonder, did every single guilty party truly face justice?